What happens when Hollywood's most beloved sweetheart steps onto the set of daytime television's most controversial talk show, expecting polite applause and soft questions, only to walk straight into a confrontation that spirals out of control? What unfolds is a moment so raw, so uncomfortable, that it would later be replayed, analyzed, and argued about for years. This was not scripted drama. This was live television at its most volatile. The morning began quietly enough at the View Studios in New York City. Crew members moved efficiently through rehearsed routines. Producers adjusted lighting. Audience members filtered in, unaware they were about to witness one of the most explosive exchanges the show had ever aired. Sandra Bullock arrived early, dressed casually but elegantly, carrying the calm confidence of someone who had spent decades navigating press tours. This interview was supposed to be easy, promote her new film, share a few heartfelt anecdotes, smile for the cameras, and leave. In the green room, she sipped coffee while her publicist reviewed the planned talking points. The tone was light, relaxed, safe. No one warned her. As the cameras rolled, Whoopi Goldberg welcomed her with warmth. "Sandra, we're so excited to have you here. Your new movie sounds incredible. Tell us about it." Sandra smiled effortlessly, her presence immediately easing the room. "Thank you for having me, Whoopi. This film has been such a passion project for me. It's about second chances, about how people can reinvent themselves even after life throws its hardest curveballs." Sarah Haynes leaned in, clearly engaged. "That sounds beautiful. What drew you to this story?" Sandra's voice softened as she spoke. "I think we all have moments when we feel like we've hit rock bottom. This character reminded me that it's never too late to choose kindness over bitterness, to build bridges instead of burning them." The audience nodded along. The conversation flowed naturally. It felt sincere, human, the kind of interview viewers loved. But Joy Behar had said nothing. She sat back, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Sandra with an intensity that grew sharper by the second. When she finally spoke, her voice cut cleanly through the warmth. "Speaking of building bridges," Joy said, her tone edged with something unmistakably sharp, "I have to ask about your recent comments on the entertainment industry." Sandra blinked, surprised by the sudden shift. "I'm not sure which comments you're referring to," she replied calmly. "Could you clarify?" Joy leaned forward, a tight smile forming. "The whole people can change narrative. It's very sweet, very idealistic. But don't you think that some people are just fundamentally selfish? That some people never change because they don't want to?" The studio went quiet. Whoopi shifted in her chair. The audience sensed it immediately. The conversation had veered off course. This wasn't about the movie anymore. Sandra paused, choosing her words carefully. "I believe in the capacity for growth," she said evenly. "I think when people are given the chance to reflect and learn from their mistakes, most." Joy repeated, letting out a dry laugh. "But not all. Some people double down on their worst instincts. They hide behind success. They play the victim while causing the damage." Every head at the table turned toward Joy. This wasn't standard debate. This wasn't even pointed questioning. It felt personal, unfiltered, unresolved. Sandra's expression shifted from surprise to concern as she tried to understand what she had walked into. "Joy." Whoopi interjected gently. "Maybe we should steer this back to Sandra's work." "No," Joy cut in. "I think this matters." The tension became suffocating. Sandra sat upright, her posture composed but guarded. "If this is about accountability," she said, "then I believe accountability and compassion can exist together. Growth doesn't erase harm, but it does make repair possible." Joy shook her head. "That sounds nice, but reality doesn't work that way," the audience murmured. Producers exchanged looks off camera. This was no longer an interview, it was a confrontation unfolding in real time. Sandra inhaled slowly. "With respect," she said, her voice firm now, "I came here to talk about a film that encourages empathy, not to be used as a stand-in for unresolved grievances." Joy's smile vanished. For a moment, no one spoke. Sandra looked around the table, then back at Whoopi. She nodded once, politely, deliberately. "I think I'm done." She stood up. Gasps rippled through the studio as Sandra removed her microphone and placed it gently on the table. Without raising her voice or making a scene, she thanked the audience, turned, and walked off the set. The cameras kept rolling. What followed was silence, thick, unmistakable, historic. A moment no one had planned and no one could undo. By the end of the day, clips of the walk-off flooded social media. Viewers argued. Commentators dissected every word. But one thing was undeniable. Live television had once again reminded the world that when control slips, truth rushes in, and sometimes it walks away. Sandra talks about second chances and redemption, Joy said sharply, breaking the fragile calm that had settled over the table. But what about accountability? What about the people who get hurt along the way while someone is supposedly finding themselves? From the corner of the studio, Sandra's publicist began gesturing urgently, hands slicing through the air in silent warning. This was not where the conversation was meant to go. But Sandra didn't look away. She didn't flinch. "I absolutely believe in accountability," Sandra replied, her voice firm, grounded. "But I also believe that holding on to anger and resentment ultimately hurts us more than it helps. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing bad behavior. It means choosing not to let that behavior define who we become in response." "How convenient." Joy shot back, her voice rising just enough to crack the studio's careful balance. "That's easy to say when you're sitting pretty with your perfect career and your perfect life. Some of us don't get that luxury. Some of us live with the real consequences of other people's choices." The air in the studio thickened. Camera operators exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut away. The audience sat frozen, caught between discomfort and disbelief. This no longer felt like a spirited debate. It felt like something raw, unresolved, and deeply personal spilling out in real time. "Joy," Sandra said carefully, her tone steady but edged now with steel, "I'm not sure what this is really about. But if there's something specific you want to address, perhaps we should do that privately instead of using your platform to attack someone who came here in good faith." "Good faith," Joy repeated, laughing bitterly. "That's rich. You want to talk about good faith? Let's talk about how people in this industry smile to your face while stabbing you in the back. Let's talk about how careers get built on stepping on others, and then those same people have the nerve to lecture the world about kindness and second chances." The other hosts shifted uneasily. Whoopi looked down at the table. Sunny Hostin's mouth fell slightly open. Alyssa Farah Griffin stared at Joy as if seeing her for the first time. This had gone far beyond a heated exchange. Joy wasn't debating a philosophy. She was unloading years of resentment, and Sandra Bullock had become the unintended target. Sandra took a slow, deliberate breath. "Joy," she said, measured and controlled, "I came here to talk about my film and connect with your audience. I don't know what personal struggles you're dealing with, but this isn't the place to work them out." "Personal struggles?" Joy's voice cracked, indignation flashing across her face. "You want to talk about personal struggles? Fine. Let's talk about your so-called humanitarian work. Let's talk about how charity events become photo opportunities. About how some people get praised for doing good, while others are actually in the trenches trying to make real change." The accusation landed like a toxic cloud, hanging in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. "That's completely out of line," Sandra replied, her composure finally beginning to fracture. "My charitable work is something I take very seriously, and I don't appreciate you questioning my motives without any basis." "Without basis?" Joy laughed harshly. "I've been in this business for decades, sweetheart. I know how the game is played. I know how people like you operate. You show up to a few galas, write a check for the tax deduction, and suddenly you're Mother Teresa." Sandra's expression hardened. When she spoke again, her voice was ice cold. "What exactly does that mean, Joy?" Joy leaned forward, eyes blazing. "It means people who think they're better than everyone else. People who float above the mess, while the rest of us are down here, fighting in the trenches. You sit there talking about forgiveness and second chances like you're some kind of moral authority." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "But where was that forgiveness when people needed it from you?" No one spoke. The studio was utterly silent now, save for the low hum of cameras and the distant murmur of traffic drifting in from the street below. Every eye was locked on Sandra, waiting, watching, to see whether she would lash out, break down, or retreat. Instead, she straightened in her chair. "I have never claimed to be perfect," she said quietly. "I have never claimed moral superiority. What I have claimed is the belief that people are capable of learning, growing, and doing better. And I refuse to apologize for that." Joy scoffed, shaking her head, but Sandra continued. "If you want to accuse me of something, do it clearly. But don't project your bitterness onto me and call it truth." The words landed with finality. For a long moment, Joy said nothing. The other hosts remained frozen, caught between shock and damage control. Somewhere off camera, a producer whispered urgently into a headset. This wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. It was a rupture. One that couldn't be smoothed over with commercial breaks or polite laughter. Live television had stripped away the filters, and what was left was a confrontation neither woman had planned, but both would now have to live with. The studio felt frozen in time as the confrontation spiraled out of control. No one seemed to know where to look or what to do. Production assistants hovered at the edges of the set, whispering urgently into headsets, waving their hands toward the control booth. But no cue came, no commercial break, no rescue. The train wreck was unfolding live and everyone was trapped inside it. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Sandra said at last, her voice low and deliberate, every word carefully chosen. "But I think you either need to explain yourself clearly or apologize for these accusations, because they're completely baseless." "Apologize?" Joy shot back, her voice rising, sharp and incredulous. "You want me to apologize? That's perfect. That right there is exactly the entitled attitude I'm talking about. You come onto my show, sit at my table, and expect me to smile and nod while you promote your little feel-good movie about redemption. It's not your show, Joy." Whoopi finally cut in, her voice firm, authoritative. "And Sandra is our guest. You need to dial this back. Right now." But Joy wasn't listening anymore. Something had snapped. Some internal restraint had given way, and years of pent-up resentment came flooding out unchecked. "Don't tell me what to do, Whoopi," Joy snapped. "I've been carrying this show for years while everyone else gets the credit. I'm the one who asks the tough questions. I'm the one who isn't afraid to call out hypocrisy when I see it." "What hypocrisy?" Sandra demanded, her own anger now unmistakable. "What exactly are you accusing me of? If you have something to say, then say it clearly instead of hiding behind vague insinuations." Joy stood up abruptly, her chair screeching backward across the floor. The sudden movement drew a collective gasp from the audience. The moment felt dangerous now, volatile, unpredictable. "You want clarity," Joy said, her voice loud and shaking. "Fine. I'll be crystal clear. I'm tired of watching people like you get praised for doing the bare minimum, while people like me get criticized for telling the truth. I'm tired of fake niceness. I'm tired of manufactured sweetness that hides the fact that Hollywood is still the same cutthroat machine it's always been." "Sit down," Sarah Haynes pleaded softly, panic creeping into her voice. "No," Joy said flatly, pointing an accusatory finger straight at Sandra. "I'm done pretending. I'm done smiling and playing nice while people who don't deserve it get elevated to saint status. You want to talk about your movie? Let's talk about how many other actresses you probably stepped on to get that role. Let's talk about how you benefited from a system that rewards people for looking a certain way and saying the right things." That was it. Sandra stood up too, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her patience was gone, stripped away by accusation after accusation. "I don't know what your problem is," she said, her voice tight with controlled fury, "but I will not sit here and let you attack my character based on whatever personal demons you're dealing with. This is completely unprofessional, and frankly it's embarrassing for everyone involved." "Embarrassing?" Joy repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think I'm embarrassing? That's rich coming from someone who built her career playing the girl next door, while probably being anything but behind closed doors." The words hit the room like a slap. The accusation was so personal, so unfounded, that even Joy seemed to realize, just for a split second, that she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The audience was stunned into silence. The other hosts looked stricken, helpless witnesses to a moment spiraling beyond repair. But instead of stopping, Joy doubled down, her face flushed red, her voice shaking now, not just with anger, but with something closer to desperation. "You know what the real problem is," she said. "The real problem is that people like you get to coast through life being celebrated for your supposed goodness, while people like me get labeled difficult for speaking the truth. I'm done being the villain just because I refuse to participate in the fantasy." "Nobody asked you to be anything other than professional," Sandra replied, her voice steady despite the anger blazing behind her eyes. "That's all. Just professional." The silence that followed was deafening. Cameras continued to roll. No one spoke, no one moved. The air felt heavy, charged with the irreversible weight of what had just been said. This was no longer an interview. It was no longer television as entertainment. It was a public unraveling, raw, messy, and impossible to undo. And everyone in that studio knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever happened next, nothing about this moment would ever be forgotten. "But what you're doing right now isn't truth-telling," Sandra said quietly. "It's just cruelty disguised as honesty." The words landed like a punch. Joy froze for a fraction of a second, her face twisting as if she'd been physically struck. Her jaw tightened, her eyes darkened. For one terrifying moment, It looked as though she might actually launch herself across the table. Around the edges of the studio, security guards shifted their weight, suddenly alert, hands hovering near their earpieces, unsure whether they were about to step in. Cruelty disguised as honesty. Joy repeated, her voice trembling with fury. You want to see cruelty? Cruelty is watching people get ahead in this business, not because they're talented, but because they know how to play the game. Cruelty is watching the system reward fake humility while punishing authentic voices. Sandra shook her head slowly, disbelief written across her face. Joy, you don't even know me. You're attacking a stranger based on assumptions, projecting whatever anger you're carrying onto someone who walked in here in good faith. That isn't authenticity. It's just sad. The word sad broke something. Joy's face went pale, then flushed a deep volatile red. Her hands began to shake, visibly now, fingers curling and uncurling against the tabletop. Sad, she repeated, her voice barely under control. You think I'm sad? I've been in this business since before you were even relevant. I didn't coast my way here. I earned my place through decades of hard work, not by playing some sweet, likable character audiences fall in love with. Nobody is questioning your place here. Whoopi tried again, leaning forward, her voice calm but urgent. Yes, they are, Joy shouted, spinning toward her co-hosts. Everyone questions my place, every review, every article, every stupid social media post. I'm always too harsh, too difficult, too much. She laughed sharply, almost hysterically. Well, maybe I am too much for this sanitized version of television where we all pretend everything is wonderful. Sandra watched her, no longer angry, just concerned, almost stunned. This was no longer about Hollywood or redemption or interviews. This was something unraveling in real time. Joy, she said gently, this doesn't sound like it's about television or the industry. It sounds like you're dealing with something much deeper than anything happening here today. Don't psychoanalyze me. Joy snapped, whirling back toward her. You don't get to sit there in your perfect little bubble and tell me what my problems are. You have no idea what it's like to fight for every opportunity, to claw your way up in a world that wants you to shut up and smile. Actually, Sandra replied quietly, I do know what that's like. Every woman in this industry does. Joy scoffed, but Sandra continued, her voice steady, resolute. But taking out your frustration on other women isn't fighting the system. It's perpetuating it. The words hit hard. For just a moment, Joy's fury faltered. Something flickered across her face, recognition, maybe even understanding. The studio held its breath. But instead of softening, she retreated deeper into her anger, as if acknowledging the truth would shatter something she couldn't afford to face. You think you're so wise, Joy said, her voice now laced with venom. You think you have all the answers, because you've managed to stay popular and relevant. Let me tell you something about relevance in this business. Sometimes it means being willing to be the villain. Sometimes it means saying what other people are too scared to say. And sometimes, Sandra replied with devastating calm, it just means being needlessly cruel to people who don't deserve it. That was the final blow. Joy's face twisted with pure rage. Without another word, she reached for her microphone pack and ripped it off, yanking so hard the wire snapped with a sharp crack that echoed through the studio. You know what? She shouted. I'm done. I'm done with this show. I'm done pretending to care about the opinions of people who wouldn't last 5 minutes in the real world. And I'm especially done being lectured by someone whose biggest problem is deciding which charity gala to attend. Gasps rippled through the audience. Joy flung the microphone onto the table and stormed away from her chair, heels striking the floor as she marched off the set. No one stopped her. No one knew how. The cameras kept rolling. Sandra remained standing, stunned, heart pounding. The other hosts sat frozen, the weight of what had just happened settling heavily over the room. Producers shouted quietly into headsets. Security hesitated, then stepped back. Lev Television had crossed a line, and there was no walking it back. What remained was silence, raw and irreversible, and the unmistakable sense that something had just ended, while something else, far more uncomfortable, had been revealed. The studio erupted into chaos. Producers shouted into headsets, frantically debating whether to cut to commercial or let the moment play out. Audience members gasped, hands flying to mouths, whispers rippling through the seats like aftershocks. At the table, the remaining hosts sat frozen, stunned into silence, unsure whether to intervene or simply survive the moment. I quit. Joy's voice rang out sharp and final, carrying across the entire studio. She stood rigidly, shoulders squared, eyes blazing. I'm done being the lightning rod for this show's controversy. while everyone else gets to play it safe, she declared. I'm done being the bad guy just because I'm willing to ask the questions nobody else has the courage to ask. Joy, please, Sunny Hostin finally said, her voice unsteady but pleading. Just sit down. Let's take a breath and work this out. You're having a moment, but we can fix this. A moment? Joy laughed bitterly. This isn't a moment. This is years of frustration finally boiling over. I've spent decades watching this industry reward mediocrity and punish honesty, and I'm done pretending that's okay. The weight of her words pressed down on the room. Cameras continued rolling, capturing every twitch, every breath. There was no script for this, no clean exit. Sandra stood slowly, smoothing her jacket as she rose. Despite the chaos swirling around her, her posture remained composed, dignified. She said quietly, I genuinely hope you get the help you need. But what just happened here wasn't honesty. It was an unprovoked attack on someone who came here in good faith. That isn't brave. It isn't authentic. It's just wrong. Joy stared at her, chest heaving, eyes glassy with emotion. For a fleeting second, something flickered across her face, regret, perhaps, or shame. The studio seemed to hold its breath. Then it vanished. Save your sympathy. Joy snapped. I don't need help from someone who thinks forgiveness fixes everything. Some things can't be forgiven, and some people don't deserve second chances. With that, she turned on her heel and stormed off the set. She left behind her notes, her coffee mug, and 22 years of television history scattered across the desk. No farewell. No explanation. Just the echo of footsteps fading down the corridor. The cameras stayed live. The remaining hosts sat motionless, stunned by the sudden emptiness Joy had left behind. The audience hesitated, unsure whether to applaud, gasp, or remain silent. The atmosphere felt heavy, like the aftermath of something irreversibly broken. Sandra slowly sat back down, visibly shaken but resolute. She exhaled, then turned toward Whoopi. I'm sorry your audience had to witness that, she said softly. That clearly wasn't about anything I said or did today. It was about something much bigger. Whoopi nodded, still processing what had just unfolded. Her voice was low but steady when she finally spoke. Sandra, on behalf of this show, I apologize. That was completely unacceptable, and you handled it with more grace than anyone should ever be expected to. The studio fell into an eerie quiet as producers finally made the call. The red lights dimmed, the feed cut to commercial. Just like that, one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history came to an end. Within hours, clips of the confrontation flooded social media. Headlines erupted, commentators dissected every word. Some defended Joy, arguing that beneath her anger lay uncomfortable truths about power and hypocrisy. Others condemned her outburst as reckless, cruel, and deeply unprofessional. But one thing was undeniable. Joy Behar hadn't just walked off a set. She had detonated her legacy in real time, leaving behind questions no commercial break could erase. Was she a truth teller pushed too far, or a veteran voice unable to separate honesty from harm? As the studio lights cooled and the audience filtered out, one reality lingered in the air. Live television doesn't forgive mistakes. It records them. And sometimes the most revealing moments aren't planned, rehearsed, or polished, but born from a breaking point no one saw coming. What do you think? Was Joy completely out of line, or was there a hard truth buried beneath all that rage? Subscribe for more shocking television moments, and share your thoughts on what really drove Joy to the edge.